All right, here we are live again. I'm Peter and back with Sebastian. Sebastian, hello, how are you?
Great, Peter. How are you doing?
Good, good. Yeah, so last week we went through the top 10 reasons why nobody needs life insurance. And we did a little, we didn't go super deep on it. We addressed a little bit of those concerns. Now we're going to start the series in a way, kind of restart it, go back to the first one, and let's expand on it a bit. So the first one is, I can already self fund my end of life expenses. But before we even dive into that, what are your end of life expenses? What
Well, first one that pops out is your funeral expenses, right? And
right.
then your tax obligations, of course, because you can't avoid those.
What would let's expand on that a bit though. So I don't know, average funeral cost is what these days? Just a base
Ballpark, yeah, I think 30, around 30.
around
Uh,
30K.
yeah, yeah, for just like a basic funeral.
Right. Taxes, what does that mean?
Well, good. So depending on what assets you have, of course, they will be deemed to be disposed of at market value. So it could be, well, your principal residence is exempted, but if you've got investment properties, if you've got RRSPs, it's a big one, and not enough people understand that one. Um, and yeah, any assets that you really have outside of your principal residence.
And I read that, and so we're dealing with capital gains essentially for that. We have to obviously deal with an accountant or lawyer and all to figure all those, like the moving parts there to figure out that final bill, but it can be a lot more than you thought, and that's fine. So in this case, it's someone's saying, listen, I have more than enough assets. I've got properties, I've got GICs, I've got, I don't know, do people have enough cash on hand to cover these things? The people I deal with, like business owners and investors, they're probably moving that money, right, and trying to grow it. So they don't necessarily have that cash on hand.
Right.
But the offset is okay. So, all right. So let's go through each of those options. So
Yep.
cash, maybe you do, maybe you don't. You might have enough for a funeral, but the taxes is going to be, I would say, more times than not. Not everybody wants all that kind of cash sitting in a bank account.
Yeah, and a lot of people that I come across, they're like, yeah, I don't want to sit on a lot of cash because it's eroding, especially with inflation. So if you're sitting on cash, it's actually erosion of your capital. So most people will have it employed somewhere. You might have a little bit of a safety net in the bank account, but most people I know would have it invested in some form, and it could be really liquid, like a
Right.
GIC.
Right.
But yeah,
Okay, so next would be something more illiquid, let's say, or less, less liquid. And maybe I'll even put these into a similar bucket. Um, Equities or property too, right? And so when I look at those, I go, okay, um, what are you selling, right?
yeah, exactly. And if will you sell the golden goose or will you sell an asset that's underperforming? If it's underperforming, the way I'm looking at it is obviously you're not going to get the maximized gains there, and depending on what your liabilities are, you'll need more. So then, does that mean you have to sell multiple assets to generate what the golden goose is? Because I doubt anyone would say, "Oh, I just sell my best property or my best asset to take care of that."
Yeah,
That
ideally, that's what you want to pass down to the next generation to sustain. And I guess the other pieces too, like you said, like are you selling your best or your worst, whether it's a property or even like a even stock portfolio, whatever that may be. I'm just talking if it's say held through a corp or something like that, right? But
Mhm.
some assets you will have, if it's RSP, you will have to dispose of them technically, right? If it's not
Right.
going to a spouse, it goes to the next generation. But um, if it's a property, um, what my thought is too is what's the market at? You know, we're
Yeah.
we're at that point. Do you want to sell any assets because the market's maybe over time, we know all these things are going to go up over time. But when life happens, you don't know where the market's going to be, and you have
Right.
to sell those assets. So, you know, we're not giving, you know, advice or anything like that. We're just having a
Yeah.
conversation to talk about, what are the possibilities that could happen, and work through that. But then also look at, are there other options that come with that? I think it's very fair to say that, yeah, you have that. We're going to dive into some other topics in terms of like, well, my kids are going to be okay. I don't want to leave them, but let's just talk about just self funding, right? So, what are other options that we can do instead of selling all these assets in our portfolio?
Great question. And just to kind of walk it back one step is yes, if you're married, there's rollover provisions that you can utilize. So that there are strategies that you can use, but for think about the other aspect is that if you've got an asset, and again, we're talking about insurance here, permanent insurance, there's a cash component. So most people, when they think about life insurance, they're thinking about the final outcome, which is death. But in between, you've got this buildup of cash. There's many options to being able to leverage that cash out. So that's what I would look at. I would say, okay, so I've got a permanent product and it's got cash in there. Maybe instead of selling my best performing asset, I utilize and I leverage my insurance policy.
Yeah, and so that goes in a you can. I mean, we talk about, our discussions is really talk. I mean, I think what we dive into is get just better understanding of what your options are. What just I mean, I haven't been in the industry as long as you have by any means, but I feel like I'm this far into understanding the flexibility and options that you can have from this. So one is, yeah, insurance can pay out. It'll pay out um, almost immediately, right, within weeks versus waiting for probate to and all that to play out on some of the other assets and having to sell them and whatnot. This is like virtually immediate compared to anything else that you'd have next to cash, right, in a bank account. The other piece that you mentioned was the leverage piece. So yeah, be able to use it now. Now it doesn't even have to be the person who died where you can get the cash from, right? It can be from another existing. Maybe that person wasn't insurable, but you have access to cash in another
Yeah,
place, right?
absolutely. Or even if you look at like there's a lot of when you're doing estate planning, you're going to use a joint last to die. So there's not going to be a payout on the first death. So
Right.
maybe it's leveraging that cash to pay certain expenses or whatever. But to bring to your point, if it's just looking at a death benefit, it's very liquid. I mean, most companies in Canada will pay out as fast as they can possibly can. So it might be a week or it might be a month, and rarely do you see it going beyond that unless it happens in the first 2 years where the companies are going to do more due diligence to check and make sure everything is legit, meaning they're gonna inquire on your application and then the reason of that you passed away and so as long as and I'll put it this way, every company, as long as you come in there with clean hands, meaning that you've given all of the information they've asked you for, you haven't withheld anything, the payout's very quick, right? So there's you got that liquidity. Do you have to worry about, oh, which asset should I sell? No, absolutely not, because you've got something that's not driven by market value. It's whatever the amount that you've purchased, or if it's something with a cash component that will grow, it will pay out.
And by the way, you don't have to wait until you pass to be able to get into it, like you said. The other thing I'd be remiss to if I didn't bring it up as well, but something like segregated funds
That's
does
right.
have some of those attributes of immediate payout to beneficiary as well, too, right?
Yeah, and a big thing is you've got bypassing probate, creditor protection. It's just like a mutual fund with an insurance wrapper. So sometimes we don't even look at that side, but you're 100% right, Pete.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the idea of these discussions is really to talk about what we when I first jumped into this world, I didn't necessarily jump in because I didn't really understand. I understood what I understood, and I knew that there was some information outside that I knew I didn't know, and so I went on that discovery to understand that a little bit more. Some of the information that's even out there, I find, is even information you don't even know that you don't know, too, right? There's so much to take in. There's lots of flexibility. We're going to dive more into these week over week, into just get a better understanding of. To me, it's everything that I'm learning. I'm having a discussion with you on that, and yeah, so look forward to some of these future discussions. Sebastian, any closing words for this one?
Yeah, you know what? Speak to your insurance advisor. Reach out. I mean, reach out to Peter. Anyone who's in the insurance space, they're willing to talk to you, and you know, just investigate your concerns, or investigate the advisor and choose an advisor. Choose three that you know you want to talk to. But it's important. Just reach out, because oftentimes we talk about insurance and people are scared and they run away. They don't want to talk about it because it's about their mortality. But reach out, because when you plan, you're just further ahead, you know. And so, Peter, I thank you for putting these series on. It just really starts that conversation, and I appreciate the work you're doing out there and all the independent advisors.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you. You're obviously helpful in providing a lot of context to what we talk about. One point you just brought up as we wrap this up was really, what I think of is I work with, you know, obviously other advisors, but then also other professionals to make sure that you get a 360 view to everything that's happening in your world. Sometimes the only thing I would say, if you're dealing with a generalist who sells multiple things, including insurance, it
Yeah.
might be good to make sure that you get someone who really understands and knows insurance at a deeper level, because it's like, someone may learn at this layer, but not know there's so much that we talked about that is there. They don't even know it's there. So make sure that we have the discussions, not just talk to someone who can sell insurance, but someone who really understands it. The power you will get out of that conversation, the very least, you're going to learn a lot. So I'll wrap it up for this week. Sebastian, how can people get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is probably the best option, or scarag at equitable.ca.
And same, catch me on LinkedIn, or Peter at returnonlife.ca. Thanks again.
Thanks, Peter.